introduction than anybody else in this room and probably anywhere else in the university. So let me tell you a couple of things that you don't know about Bob. He was foolish when he was young, one thing that I can tell you, and I will even prove it. He went to K-State. He got his BS in physics and MS in math in K-State. Then he went and taught a little bit in Benedictine, and then he moved to Oklahoma to a place called, well, it used to be called Claremont College. Now it's called
Rogers State University.
And he spent there about 8 years, and then he resigned in disgust. Strangely, just after he resigned, he got this form letter from, Gordon Wiseman, from here. Saying, form letter, he sent it probably to all regional universities, saying if you have a student or somebody that wants to dabble in being a lab director in physics and astronomy department at KU, just let them know. Let him know. Bob said, student hell, I want this. He came here, interviewed for the job on a Friday, got it on a Saturday, went back to Claremont, Oklahoma, packed everything he had in his little convertible Chevy.
Super Sport.
Super Sport. It was, by the way, the last time that he could pack everything he had in one car. That is gone. His plan was, when he resigned, because he resigned before he applied here, before he even knew that there is a job here, he decided to come to Lawrence. I was going to say back, but it's not back to Lawrence because he was in Manhattan, as you all know, to start a music career. And apparently our labs were enticing him away from becoming a rock star.
Fortunately, I didn't have to do that.
So that's all I'm going to say about Bob. Everything else you know about him, and enjoy the show.
When I was asked to give this colloquium, I knew I was going to have to learn to use PowerPoint, something which I'd successfully avoided doing for over 70 years. I think I can figure this thing out after Barbara explained it to me 3 times. Of course, you have to start a PowerPoint presentation with an outline, and here it is. You can make of it what you like. Let's see if this works here. Yes. Spring of 1980, I was sitting in my office in Claremore, Oklahoma, a school which was then staggering under the weight of whatever the latest educational administration buzzword or fad was. We'd been through searches for excellence and quests for quality. We'd been down pathways to innovation. We'd done more with less. We were celebrating the student as product. I was a little tired of this, and I thought, now, KU, this is the flagship university. They're probably past all that stuff by now, right? Well, no, they were just 25 years behind the times. Or I should say they fought a successful rear guard action for about 25 years. Okay, so anyway, I got Gordon's letter. This looked like the perfect thing for me. So I came in here on Friday afternoon. I went into Gordon's office, which is now Kristen's office, and we had the interview in there, and it went something along these lines, as I recall. They asked me a few questions and ascertained that I did know shit from Shinola and Sears from Zemansky. And so Tom Armstrong called me the next morning and told me I had the job. So I as Hume said, I drove to Oklahoma, threw everything I had in my car, and drove to Lawrence, found a cheesy little apartment someplace on Tennessee Street, and I went to work. I got this thing. Oh yeah, here we go. All right. This picture appeared in the next issue of the alumni newsletter. Me on the left, of course, Bob Phillips, who was here on a 2-year postdoc. At first, I never thought much of anything about the fact that we both had the same first name. But of course, this was a great time for conspiracy theories. And I since have begun to wonder if maybe this was a little more than just coincidence. Here's the department directory for the fall of 1980. And if you look there, you'll see there's a Robert Burse, there's a Robert Freoff, there's a Robert Phillips, there's a Robert Stump, there's a Robert Beyer, there's a Robert Reamer, there's a Robert Curry, there's a Robert Bunch, there's a Robert Frigo, there's a Robert Johnson, there's a Robert Kessel, and a Robert Racka. There was an even dozen Roberts in the department. One less and it had been a prime number. Coincidence? I don't think so. Another thing you'll notice here too, the room numbers. Every room has 2 numbers. They had just completed the new part of Millot Hall, and they decided they didn't have enough room numbers, so they renumbered all the numbers in both parts of the building. So we had the old numbering system, we had the new numbering system, and to make things worse, everybody referred to the labs by the course number that was taught in them. So every lab had 3 numbers, and it took me a while to get it figured out, but eventually I did manage to get things straightened up. And one of the very first things I learned was that the department was in possession of at least 200 pounds of mercury. And probably a good quarter of that was unfettered by any container. It was running around on the floor somewhere. Room 2068 down here between the 2 labs was originally designed to hold the apparatus for those 2 labs. It was a little too big for that job, so of course it immediately got taken over by a research group in a turf grab, and all of the apparatus got moved out into the hall. So you know how narrow this hall is here. Imagine it with a row of cabinets down both sides. That's where all the equipment for the second floor labs was. Well, I don't know how long it had been that way, but the fire marshal caught on and laid the law down, so we had to find someplace else to move it. So we had a big party one afternoon. All the grad students were there, and we moved all of this stuff somewhere. I don't even recall where. And when this one row of cabinets came up, there was a good acre of mercury flowing around there on the floor that had fallen out of broken U-tube manometers in that cabinet. So as the new guy, it was my job to get that mercury cleaned up, and I eventually did. And then I immediately went and bought a special mercury vacuum cleaner after that, because that wasn't the only part of it there was. In fact, during the crumbling classroom renovation era, there was a contractor in here, and I managed to do him a big favor. I kept him from making a big mistake in working on the second floor labs. So he came to my office a few days later, says, come with me. And so we came up here, and he walked around behind this cabinet, the old one that was in here, And he says, look here. And he opens this door, and right down there on the floor was about 20 pounds of liquid mercury. And so he says, I'm going to lunch, and if that's all gone when I get back, nobody else will have to know about this. So that sounded like a good deal to me, so I went and got my mercury vacuum cleaner, and actually the container on the mercury vacuum cleaner only holds about 5 pounds, and it took 2 or 3 of them to get the stuff all up. How it all got down there, I have no idea. I don't want to look under it again. I'll leave that to Jennifer. Anyway, for quite some time, my job was particularly concerned with picking up mercury. And of course, there were a lot of empty rooms, old labs full of equipment that was not being used anymore. Most of the research at that time was done at the national laboratories. Very little in-house measurement was going on. And as the old guard started to retire and new people started coming in who are now the old guard, they decided we need more in-house research. And so we had to get rid of all this stuff. So for quite some time, I spent most of my time throwing stuff away. There was a really large research magnet in down in one of the basement labs, and Caw Motors bid on it and said, yeah, we'll haul it off and scrap it. They came in with a flatbed truck and backed up to the main dock. We wheeled the magnet off in it. Kind of right there you can see the yoke, and then there's part of the big coils. Of course, this flatbed truck had a pretty big overhang behind the rear axle, and so there it was until they came with another truck with a winch and managed to winch the magnet up to the front part of the truck. I remember Don Nieto and Jesse Nording and I standing on the dock with a big cart full of 1-inch mag computer tapes. And we spent the whole afternoon sailing those 1-inch mag tapes over into the dumpster. It was, you take your entertainment anywhere you can find it. Of course, the main thing I was hired for was to teach and to supervise GTAs. And of course, any of you who've been GTAs have attended the big fall Saturday morning meeting where we do the first setup. This one was actually from spring of '86. That's Gordon Wiseman and Jack Davidson and me and Noah Kwok. And the sketch was done by a TA named Richard Holy. These were big deals at the time, lots of food. And then in the fall, of course, that afternoon's always the department picnic, which when Jack Davidson was the chairman, picnic was always held in his backyard. He had an in-ground swimming pool. Here's a picture from that era. Me with the guitar, of course. John Ralston there in the middle. I showed this picture to John Clune some time ago, and he said, "That's Ralston?" He said, "I never would have known him with that porn star mustache." So, let's see here. Oh yes, then along about that same period of time, something particularly important happened to me. I found out that 10 p.m. was bedtime. It was not time to go to Bogart's and shoot pool and drink pitchers of beer. But it was all for the best. Naturally, I would say that since my wife is in the audience. But yes, so my life settled down considerably after that. And Then, one day, this headline appeared in the UDK. Now, my reaction to this was something along these lines. I could imagine Birkenstock Wobblies picketing the 114 lab, scabs and strike breakers from K-State and Mizzou coming in. I went over to my opposite number in the chemistry department and I asked him if he was worried about this. He wasn't worried about it at all. He said, "What do I care if they're unionized?" So, then of course, along with teaching and supervising TAs, I've been writing and rewriting the lab manual for many years. Here's a page from the way it was when I first went to work here. It was typed on IBM Selectrics, and the drawings were done by the drafting department at the School of Engineering, and the whole thing was pasted together with whiteout and Scotch tape, and then Xeroxed. Well, finally one summer I got a new computer in my office, and it had a drawing program in it. And John Ralston, porn star mustache and all, gave me some pointers on how to put together pictures using circles and rectangles. So after a little scratching around, I came up with this. And once I had this done, I thought I was ready for prime time. So I attempted this. And I didn't get much else done that summer. I think it probably took me a week just to get the numbers around the dials on that analog oscilloscope. And then 2 years later, we bought digitals. I was heartbroken. And now, of course, when you talk about education, you have to always talk about evaluations. And I've looked at a lot of student evaluations for a lot of TAs over the years, and it's pretty amazing some of the things that you'll read on these evaluations. Here's I can understand the ballerina business, conservation of angular momentum and so on, but I have no idea where the unicorns came from. Some of them get a little florid. And of course, there's two sides to every question. And then, of course, my personal favorite. And of course, everybody loves demonstrations. There's the famous picture of Polly and Bohr playing with a tippy top. The little top that you spin it right side up and it turns over the other way. So I always enjoyed demonstrations, and I've developed a number of them, and I brought what turned out to be the oldest and the newest of the demonstrations that I developed. One I brought with me, this one here. The school I was teaching at in Oklahoma was a former military academy, and for some reason they had a Norden bomb site, the secret bomb site of World War II. And of course it was all taken apart. And I found this wonderful little gear train in it. The thing about this little gear train, if you hold this end and turn this end, everything turns in one direction. If you hold this end and turn this end, you have two parts exactly alike, turning in opposite directions with equal angular velocity. So if you hold it so everything turns the same direction, it's stable. It's gyroscopically stable. On the other hand, if you turn it the other way, so you've got equal parts turning opposite directions, it's not gyroscopically stable. So, angular momentum is a vector quantity. Okay, now this one I just worked up. Better see if this is going to work first. I don't know if we got. All right, we got gas. That'll be enough. All right, now I have two pieces of material here of nominally the same dimensions. One of them, this one here, is a very good thermal conductor. This one here is a very poor thermal conductor. This is aluminum. This is the material whose name may not be spoken, so I'll simply refer to it as bored Voldemort. All right, now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a match right there over where the flame will go on each one of the two materials. And then I'll put another match out here remote from where the heat source is located. Now, I'm going to push the two Bunsen burners under these two matches here. This is the good conductor, the aluminum. This is bored Voldemort, a very poor conductor. Another thing I saw watching Alice's colloquium was you have to ask questions and make people vote when you do one of these things, okay? All right, so which match is going to light first? Will it be the one on board Voldemort? Who thinks that one will light first? Okay. Who thinks the one on aluminum, the good conductor, will light first? Okay, more hands. Excellent. All right, here we go. This takes a little bit. I should have brought my guitar along. I've written a great song about Bill Clinton. Okay. Now the heat inputs are as nearly equal as I can make them. Theme music would be nice. Aha! The one over the flame on board Voldemort lit first. Okay, which one will light last? All right, that's an easy one. In fact, that one never will light. So why didn't this one light first? Too good a conductor. There we go. That one finally lit. The one over the flame lit. I'd try moving it in a little closer, but The one I did it this morning, I turned the head the other way. Ah, there we go. Okay. And in fact, the whole match finally caught fire and burned out and lit the head. So you don't want to put that one too far away. All right, this one never will light, so I'll shut this off right now. Okay, so under certain circumstances, if you want to keep heat away from somewhere, a good conductor of heat may be a whole lot better way to do it than a very poor conductor of heat. Because here, the heat can't get away. You get a hot spot right over the flame. Okay. All right. So, demonstrations. How are we doing on time? Oh, great. Okay. Now, it's also, as I said earlier, obligatory. Anytime you do a PowerPoint presentation, you must have a graph. So, I did some research and found this one. Total flux of useless paperwork in metric tons versus academic year since I've been here. 1980, we had a caretaker, Chancellor Del Shankel. Nothing much happened then. And then the Gene Budick administration, you see, we had slow but steady growth in useless paperwork. Then we had another Del Shankel flat year. Then we had the Hemingway years. And of course, we had explosive growth during the Hemingway years. You can see that the curve ends at the beginning of the current administration. There are two reasons for that. Number one, I was unable to find a really reliable conversion factor to convert metric tons to gigabytes. But second and mostly important, I'm still working here for another month.
Why are there no error bars?
You weren't supposed to notice that. Yes, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Here is I brought along an example of some useless paperwork. This form here was entitled the University of Kansas College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Unclassified Professional Staff Members Self-Evaluation and Annual Report of Activities. That's just the title. This was November 1996. My reaction to this apparently was quite similar to most everybody else's reaction to it because this is the only year it came around. Here was my response on part 3. I was already thinking about retirement in '96, apparently. Incidentally, we've occasionally been, the department has occasionally been criticized for making too much money out of the lab manuals. And I was digging through one of my file drawers and I came up with a 1963 physics lab manual for KU written by J.D. Stranathan and A.A. Strassenberg. The price on it is $1.75. Now, I went online and found a method for tracking inflation, and $1.75 50 years ago would translate to about $14 now. And actually, we sell them to the bookstore for $8. They mark them up a third and sell them for about $11.50. So we've actually stayed behind inflation on our lab manuals. Now, another thing that's come along here in the last 3 years is the lab videos. This was an idea of Michael Murray's that we should make videos of introductions to the experiments, and so we started in doing it. Michael helped out, did some storyboarding on the first 2 or 3. He was the only other person than myself who's ever appeared in one of the videos. He has such a high albedo that we reflected some sonic beams off of him for experiment M13. Now, if you've watched any of these videos, you know they are very professionally filmed and very professionally edited. And I want to introduce to you the man who did all of that. Neil Rasmussen, right over there behind the camera. Great job. They would have not have been the same without him. Now, they've been in use now for, a couple of years. And I'm told that they are watched more often than any other video produced by the University of Kansas. And I do get recognized. I've been recognized downtown, recognized on campus. I worried about that a little. The other day, for example, I was just stepping out of my office and a student came up to me to ask for directions, and he said, "Are you Mr. Bob? The star of the Mr. Bob show?" I admitted that I was. And so he said, "You know, you're a big celebrity on this campus. Everybody knows you." And he pulls out his phone and he says, "Would you mind if I took a picture with you just to prove to my friends that I met Mr. Bob?" So we had a selfie. I got to thinking, my gosh, if I'm a big celebrity, then maybe there's some ways to profit from this. Certainly every big celebrity needs to have some publicity stills to autograph. So so I went home, I hung a fuzzy blanket on the wall, I turned the track lights over there and ran it through Photoshop, and there we are. Look good on a t-shirt, you know, right up there with Che Guevara. So that kind of brings us up to today. People ask me what my plans are, and there they are. That's idyllic scene there is my farm in Greenwood County. Actually, the foreground is Greenwood County, the background is Lyon County, so I'm close enough to dodge across the road if in an emergency. It has 9 outbuildings, every one of which is filled with a mix of junk and manure from former farm animals. And so probably the next 5 or 10 years or so will be spent cleaning that out. So in fact, it'll actually be very much like the first 5 or 10 years that I worked in the department. The mix of manure versus junk will probably be a little different. But I have big plans for it. We do plan to keep the house in Lawrence for a while. If I thought about it for a long time. If I had to move right out of the house in Lawrence immediately, I was never going to retire. I just couldn't face that. It'd be too easy to go to work. But if we got several years to get the junk cleaned out of the house, why, we'll be fine. So, if anybody comes up to you next semester and says, "Where in the heck is Bob?" you just tell them this. Thank you.
Be a free-for-all. Whatever you want to ask Bob, your last chance. Ever.
Hey, you gonna have a cake at your place sometime?
Who's bringing it? Hey, I'm on half pay. But I think there'll be beer tomorrow.
You never answered the question about the error bars.
The error bars, well, I didn't want to get too uppity, you know what I mean? I just had an email from William Rowland, former GTA, who works for National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration now. He sent me an email thanking me for putting error analysis in all the basic labs because he was having to do it all the time and he was the go-to guy around there about it. So I don't regret a bit of it. I do regret not putting it on that graph though. Had I known you were actually going to come to colloquium, I would have done it. Yes?
So where is the mercury pump today?
The mercury pump is stored on a shelf in the old battery room in the basement. It hasn't had to be used for quite some time. I would not rule out the possibility that lurking somewhere around the building, there's not still a big pool of mercury somewhere.
That's right. We found a bottle of mercury last summer.
Oh, I thought we had gotten rid of all. We had several 75-pound steel carboys of it and all kinds of plastic and glass bottles. I'm sure there's still lots of manometers hiding around somewhere that have it in it. But yep, the mercury vacuum cleaner is tanned, rested, and ready.
Well,
I gotta ask, what's the biggest screw up you've seen for a TA in 35 years?
Well, we did have one guy arrested for stalking one of his students. That would have to go right near the top. One guy lost his grade book right at the end of school. I don't remember how on earth we ever. And of course, somebody who would lose a grade book was not somebody. Back in those days, in the office we had big card files with every student's, a card for each student. And instead of putting them on Blackboard or putting them on the online grade recording, the TAs would all have to go down to the office, get the stack of cards, transfer their grades onto the cards. And as I recall, this guy had some of his grades on the cards, enough that we could make do. But that was another big one. But the stalker was real good. We had another guy who he called all the men in the lab by their last name, Mr. So-and-so. He called all the women honey. And he could be an embarrassment occasionally too. For the most part, we've had and still have outstanding GTAs in this department. I have very, very seldom ever had serious problems with TAs. There was one guy, 5-string banjo player, who'd been at a party at my place until about 4 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning, and he had an 8 o'clock Saturday lab. And students told me about it later. Says, "Oh yeah, it went fine. He came in, he let us all in, told us what to do. Then he climbed up on the bench and went to sleep." Adrian.
What was your biggest problem with a faculty member?
Oh, I took that slide out, Adrian. It was no one present. However, as soon as the announcement of my colloquium went out, the very first email that I got was from this particular faculty member. I know you do. Yes, he was very famous in the department. I was going to bring along the ballistic pendulum that we rebuilt some years ago to make it absolutely impossible for anyone to get shot with it, because this faculty member had managed to set it up in this room and miss the pendulum. If you look just to the right of that window over there, if you look carefully, you'll find a divot in the wall where this faculty member managed to miss the window, fortunately.
It wasn't possible.
I know. He was a very unusual man. Yes, he was also famous. He was famous with a screwdriver. He would take pieces of equipment apart, very complicated pieces of equipment, down to the last screw. And then he'd take them to the machine shop and ask the machine shop to put it all back together. And amazingly, most of the time they managed to do it. But if I told specifically what the thing, well, I just decided I wouldn't bring this one little thing up that I got into with him. Well, no, I decided I wouldn't do it. But it's an excellent question. Actually, Dick Sapp was not too pleased with me for a while. Once during the years I was throwing things away, I threw away some things that Dick still had plans for. Forgiven and forgotten?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Yes, it was on my calendar, 3 o'clock, go throw something away. So I'd go to the basement, start going in rooms, pick something that had a lot of dust on it and go throw it in the dumpster. And that was...
Well, I might say that's what he started to do this weekend. But everything he threw away, I found a purpose for.
Yeah, I may have a little more trouble at the farm.
Yeah, but Bob, some of that equipment's, are relics.
Oh, absolutely. I have. In fact, there is a relic cabinet. Most of you TAs have seen the relic cabinet. It's a stop on the TA orientation tour. It's in the 3rd floor apparatus storeroom. There's one cabinet there that is a real museum of ancient electrical measurement equipment. There's a general use meter that you change scales by hanging counterweights on the end of a rod. I think it's signed by Lord Kelvin.
They're trying to convince the Spencer Museum to organize it.
We could set up a really nice late 30s electrical experiment with that.
Well, they promised they're going to send us somebody there to look at what we have on the side. Still waiting.
All right, well, thank you very much. Neil Rasmussen.